The raffle ticket trembled between my fingers as Dr. Stevens called out the winning numbers. One by one, they matched mine, each digit a tiny explosion in my chest. When he announced I'd won the luxury Napa Valley getaway, I couldn't stop grinning. 2 nights at the Golden Valley Resort, wine tastings, spa treatments, everything Brandon and I desperately needed. Congratulations, Joy. My coworker Adam clapped me on the back. About time something good happened around here. I clutched the golden envelope to my chest, already imagining Brandon's face when I surprised him. We hadn't taken a real vacation since our honeymoon 3 years ago. Between his demanding sales job and his mother's constant emergencies, we barely had time for date nights anymore. He's going to flip, I said, more to myself than Adam. In a good way, I hope. Adam's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. He'd heard enough of my marriage troubles over lunch breaks to fill a therapy session. I rushed home early, stopping to pick up Brandon's favorite takeout and a bottle of champagne. The house was quiet when I walked in. No mother-in-law camping on our couch or calling with her latest crisis. Perfect. Brandon came home late, as usual. His tie was loose, dark circles under his eyes. "Hey, babe," he mumbled, barely looking up from his phone. "I have amazing news." I set out the food, poured champagne. "Remember that company raffle?" He glanced up briefly. "The charity thing? I won. 2 nights at Golden Valley Resort in Napa, all expenses paid. Just you and me, next weekend." I held out the envelope like an offering. Brandon's fingers froze on his phone. "Next weekend? Yes, isn't it perfect? We can finally have that romantic getaway we've been talking about." He set his phone down slowly. "Joy, Mom's having her knee surgery next weekend. I told you I needed to be there for her recovery." The champagne bubbles turned sour in my stomach. "That's just a minor outpatient procedure. The doctor said she'd be fine in a day." "She needs me there. You know how she gets anxious about medical stuff since Dad died." "She has a whole church group ready to help her. And Tom—" "Don't bring up Tom." Brandon's voice hardened. "He abandoned her. I won't do the same thing." I took a deep breath. What if you took her instead of me?" The words felt like betrayal in my mouth, but I had to know. Brandon's face lit up. "That's perfect. Mom would love it. She's always wanted to visit wine country." The room spun slightly. "I was joking, Brandon. The prize is for couples. I won it. I want to go with my husband." "Don't be selfish, Joy. Mom needs this more than we do. She's been so lonely lately." "Selfish?" The word hit like a slap. "I'm selfish for wanting 2 days alone with my husband?" Brandon stood up, food untouched. "If you can't understand how much Mom needs me right now, maybe we need to rethink some things." "What things?" "This marriage, our priorities." He grabbed his keys. "I'm going to check on Mom. Don't wait up." The front door slammed, leaving me alone with cooling takeout and flat champagne. My phone buzzed. A text from Grace. "How'd he take the news?" I stared at the golden envelope, now crumpled in my fist. 3 years of putting Linda first. 3 years of canceled dates and interrupted moments. 3 years of watching my marriage dissolve into a twisted threesome I never signed up for. My fingers flew across the phone. "You free for coffee? I need to talk about revenge." Grace stirred her coffee with calculated precision, her eyes fixed on me across the diner booth. "He actually suggested taking his mother instead of you?" I pushed my untouched eggs around the plate. "You know what kills me? 5 years ago, Brandon would have never done this. Remember our wedding? He actually told Linda to back off when she tried to plan the whole thing herself." "I remember." "What changed?" The question hung between us like smoke. My mind drifted to our first anniversary when Brandon surprised me with a weekend in Seattle. We made it halfway there before Linda called, claiming chest pains. By the time we got to the emergency room, she was chatting with nurses about their children. Nothing wrong with her heart, just a panic attack, they said. "Everything changed after his father died," I said. "It's like Brandon's terrified of losing her too." Grace's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then her eyes widened. "Speaking of Linda, isn't that her?" I turned. Through the diner's front window, I watched my mother-in-law stride into the boutique across the street, looking remarkably spry for someone facing knee surgery next week. "Let's follow her," Grace said, already reaching for her purse. "What? No, that's exactly what we're doing." She threw down cash for our breakfast. Come on, Nancy Drew. We crossed the street, ducking into the boutique. Linda stood at a rack of designer dresses, holding up a sequined number that cost more than my monthly car payment. Can you believe Brandon? She was saying into her phone. Trying to waste that lovely prize on Joy when he knows I've always wanted to see wine country? Yes, I know the knee thing was last minute, but it worked, didn't it? My stomach clenched. Grace grabbed my arm, steadying me. Of course I feel bad, Linda continued, but what choice do I have? Ever since his father died, I've had to get creative to keep him close. You should have seen how he used to be with her, Sarah. Like I didn't even exist. The dress slipped from my numb fingers, hitting the floor with a soft thud. Linda spun around. Our eyes met. I'll call you back, she said quickly, ending the call. Her face transformed, concern replacing calculation. Joy, what a surprise. I was just looking for something to wear after my surgery. Funny, I said, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. I thought you'd be resting that knee. Oh, the doctor said light activity is good for circulation. She smiled, but her eyes darted toward the exit. I should get going. So much to do before next week. Like planning your wine tour? The color drained from her face. I don't know what you think you heard. I heard enough. I stepped closer. You're not having surgery at all, are you? Now, Joy, don't jump to conclusions. Brandon wouldn't like... Brandon isn't here. My voice dropped lower. But I am, and I heard everything. Linda's facade cracked. You don't understand. After Robert died, Brandon was all I had left. Then you came along, and suddenly he had someone else to care about. Do you know what that's like? To watch someone you love choose someone else? Yeah, Linda, I do. She reached for my arm. I stepped back. Please don't tell him, she whispered. He wouldn't understand. Grace appeared at my side, phone in hand. Too late, I recorded everything. Linda's eyes narrowed. You wouldn't dare. I thought about Brandon, about our ruined Seattle trip, about countless dinners interrupted by his mother's emergencies, about the way he looked at me last night, choosing her over me without hesitation. You're right, I said. I won't tell him? Yet. But that Napa trip, it's staying mine. And if you try to interfere, Brandon will hear exactly how creative you've gotten at keeping him close. I turned and walked out, Grace beside me, leaving Linda clutching her designer dress like a shield. Outside, my hands shook as I gulped the cool morning air. That was badass, Grace said softly. What now? I watched Linda hurry out of the boutique, phone already pressed to her ear. Now we start planning that trip to Napa, and this time, I'm not taking no for an answer. The bank statement trembled in my hands as I stared at the series of transfers. $2,000 last month, $1,500 the month before, all to an account I didn't recognize. Our savings had been hemorrhaging money for months, and I'd finally discovered why. I called the bank. 5 minutes later, I had my answer. The account belonged to Linda Parker. The front door clicked open. Brandon walked in, whistling. He froze when he saw me at the kitchen table, papers spread out like evidence at a crime scene. You're home early, he said. Funny thing about that. I held up the statement. I had to leave work when the mortgage company called. Apparently, we're 2 months behind on payments. The whistle died on his lips. I can explain. Please do. Explain why you've been sending thousands to your mother while we default on our house. She needed help with medical bills. What medical bills, Brandon? The fake knee surgery? The words shot out before I could stop them. His face darkened. What are you talking about? I saw her yesterday, shopping for designer dresses, strutting around like a runway model. Some knee problem. You're spying on my mother now? No, I'm discovering how deep her manipulation goes. And yours. Brandon slumped into a chair. It's not what you think. After Dad died, after your father died, you became her emotional husband. I get it. But stealing from our future? That's crossing a line. I didn't steal anything. It's our money. Our money? When was the last time you consulted me about our money? The silence stretched between us like a chasm. My phone buzzed. A text from Grace. Found Tom's number. Want it? Brandon noticed my expression change. Who's that? Your brother. He shot up from his chair. Stay away from Tom. He doesn't understand our family. Maybe he understands more than you think. I stood, gathering the bank statements. I'm going to Grace's tonight. Don't wait up. Joy, wait. He grabbed my arm. Mom needs us. She's all alone. And whose fault is that? I yanked free. Did you ever wonder why Tom left? Why your father spent so much time at work? Why I'm leaving right now? You're not leaving. We can fix this. Can we? Because from where I'm standing, there are 3 people in this marriage, and I'm the only one being honest. I walked out, my heart hammering. In my car, I texted Grace back. Send Tom's number. Time to hear the other side of this story. An hour later, I sat across from Tom Parker in a quiet bar on the edge of town. He looked like Brandon, but harder, weathered by years of choosing freedom over family obligation. So, he said, studying his whiskey, little brother's following in mother's footsteps. What do you mean? The money thing. It's how she controlled Dad, too. Emotional blackmail backed by financial manipulation. She'd spend recklessly, then cry about bills until he gave in. When he finally stood up to her, he trailed off. What happened? Heart attack at 55. Stress, the doctor said, but I knew better. Tom's knuckles whitened around his glass. Brandon was always her favorite, more pliable. After Dad died, I tried to warn him. He chose her side. Haven't spoken since. My phone lit up with Brandon's 10th message. Please come home. We can work this out. You know what the worst part is? Tom continued. She's not evil. She's just empty. Nothing's ever enough. Not Dad's love, not my independence, not Brandon's devotion. And now, not your marriage. How did you break free? He smiled grimly. I realized something. Sometimes loving someone means walking away, letting them face the consequences of their choices. I thought about the Napa tickets sitting in my purse, about Brandon's ultimatum, about years of putting Linda first. I have an idea, I said slowly, but I'll need your help. Tom leaned forward. I'm listening. It's time for a family reunion, one that forces everyone to face the truth, even if it breaks us all. 3 days at Grace's house turned into a week. Brandon's calls became less frequent, his messages shorter. Each one ended the same way. Mom needs me, never I need you, or come home. I threw myself into work, but even there, I couldn't escape. Adam caught me crying in the break room, staring at an old photo on my phone. Brandon and me in Seattle before we turned back. You look different there, Adam said, sliding a coffee across the table. Happy? I tried to smile. Real? He hesitated. Listen, there's something you should know. I overheard Brandon on a call yesterday during the client meeting. My stomach tightened. Brandon hadn't mentioned any meeting. He was talking about selling stocks, Adam continued. Something about needing quick cash for a down payment. Down payment? The coffee turned bitter in my mouth. What down payment? On a condo, for his mother. The mug slipped from my hands, shattering against the floor. Coffee spread like blood across the tiles. Joy, I have to go. I grabbed my purse, leaving the mess behind. 20 minutes later, I sat in our investment advisor's office, watching him pull up our accounts. The numbers confirmed my worst fears. Brandon had liquidated almost everything. The transfer started 3 months ago, the advisor explained. Mr. Parker said you were both aware. We weren't both anything. I stood up, the room spinning slightly. Thank you for your time. Outside, I called Tom. Did you know about the condo? What condo? The one your brother's buying for Linda, with our retirement funds. Silence crackled across the line. Then, meet me at Murphy's, now. At the bar, Tom nursed a scotch while I paced. She did this before, he said finally, right before Dad died. Convinced him to buy her a vacation house in Florida. Said she needed somewhere to heal after her imaginary cancer scare. Cancer scare? One of her greatest hits. Lasted 6 months. Miraculous recovery, of course. He laughed bitterly. Dad died before the closing. Heart attack, remember? The stress of refinancing everything. My phone buzzed. Brandon again. This time, I answered. Where are you? His voice was tight. Mom's worried sick. Is she, or is she too busy condo shopping? The line went quiet. Who told you? Does it matter? Were you going to tell me before or after you emptied our accounts? You don't understand? No, you don't understand. I just left our investment advisor's office. You didn't just take our savings, Brandon. You took our future. Mom needs security after everything she's been through. Everything she's been through? My voice rose. What about what she's put us through? What about what she did to your father? Don't bring him into this. Why not? Because you might realize you're following his footsteps right into an early grave. Tom flinched beside me. I'm doing what's right, Brandon said. If you can't support that? If I can't support that, what? You'll leave me? Newsflash, Brandon. You left this marriage a long time ago. I just didn't want to admit it. I hung up before he could respond. Tom watched me carefully. What now? He asked. My phone lit up with a text from Grace. Found you an apartment, 3-month lease available immediately. Another message popped up, this one from Linda. Please don't destroy my family. Brandon needs me. I stared at the words, feeling something shift inside me. Not sadness anymore, not even anger. Something colder, more focused. Now? I looked at Tom. Now we stop playing defense. You said Linda had a miracle recovery from her cancer scare? He nodded slowly. I bet there are medical records, or rather, a lack of them. Records that might interest Brandon's therapist or his lawyer. Joy, she wants to play games with people's lives? Fine, but I'm done being a pawn. I stood up, steadier than I'd felt in weeks. It's time to show Linda what happens when you push someone too far. Tom's expression darkened with recognition. You sound like Dad, right before the end. Good, I said, reaching for my keys. Because this is the end, just not the one Linda's expecting. The hospital records lay scattered across Grace's dining room table like pieces of a twisted puzzle. Tom's contact at County General had come through. Every medical file for Linda Parker over the past decade. Nothing, Grace said, shuffling through papers. No cancer screenings, no serious illnesses, just routine checkups and... She paused, frowning at a document. What? Psychiatric referrals, lots of them, all declined. My phone buzzed. Brandon. Coming home tonight, we need to talk about the condo. I ignored it, focusing on the papers. Look at these dates. The first referral was right after your father died, I said to Tom. He leaned forward, eyes narrowing. 2 weeks before she claimed she found the lump. The imaginary lump that convinced your father to buy that house. And nearly bankrupted him doing it? Tom's jaw tightened. History repeating itself. Grace's doorbell rang. Through the window, I caught a glimpse of Linda's silver Mercedes. Perfect timing, I muttered, grabbing the files. Let's see how she handles her own medical history. But when Grace opened the door, it wasn't Linda who stepped inside. It was Brandon. Mom's in the car, he said quickly. She doesn't know I'm here. His eyes locked onto the papers in my hands. What are those? Your mother's greatest performances. I held up a psychiatric referral. Tell me, did she ever mention these? You had no right. Like you had no right to drain our accounts? I stepped closer. Your father died because of her games, Brandon. And you're following the same path. Dad died of a heart attack. After months of financial stress and emotional manipulation. Just like what she's doing to you now. Brandon's face flushed. The condo is an investment? It's a trap, just like the Florida house was for your father, just like this marriage has become for me. Joy, I'm going to Napa next weekend, I cut him off. With or without you, but first you need to see something. I handed him the psychiatric referrals. His hands trembled as he read. Multiple recommendations for treatment of factitious disorder, he mumbled. Tendency to fabricate medical conditions for attention and control. A car horn blared outside, Linda growing impatient. She needs help, Brandon. Real help, not enabling. He looked up, tears in his eyes. What am I supposed to do? Choose. Right now. Stay here. Read these files, face the truth, or go back to that car and keep pretending. The horn sounded again, longer this time. She's waiting, I said softly. Brandon stared at the papers, then at me. For a moment, I saw a glimmer of the man I'd married. strong, independent, capable of standing up to his mother's manipulation. Then his phone buzzed. Linda's text lit up the screen. "I'm feeling dizzy. Please hurry." Just like that, the glimmer vanished. He set the papers down. "I can't leave her alone like this." "Like what? Perfectly healthy but desperate for attention?" "You don't understand." "No, you don't understand. This ends now. Either you stay and face reality or I'm done. And I'm taking everything we have left to court." Brandon stepped back, shaking his head. "You wouldn't." "Try me. I've got 3 years of financial records and a stack of medical files that prove elder abuse by proxy. How do you think a judge will view that?" The horn blared a third time. Brandon looked at the door, then back at me. "I'm sorry," he whispered and walked out. I watched through the window as he got into the Mercedes. As they drove away, Tom placed a hand on my shoulder. "Now what?" I picked up my phone, dialing my lawyer's number. "Now we do this my way. Book your ticket to Napa, Tom. It's time for that family reunion we discussed." "Joy," Grace warned. "Revenge won't fix this." "This isn't about revenge anymore." I watched the Mercedes disappear around the corner. "It's about survival, and I'm done being the victim in Linda Parker's tragedy." The Napa Valley sunset painted everything gold, but I felt nothing but cold as I watched Brandon's car pull into the resort parking lot. Linda sat in the passenger seat, exactly where I should have been. "Right on schedule," Tom muttered beside me. "Mom never could resist crashing a party." I clutched the envelope containing the medical records. "Did you send the anonymous tip?" "Called the front desk an hour ago. They think she's here for a surprise anniversary celebration." Brandon helped Linda out of the car, her movements deliberately slow and fragile. The same act she'd perfected during her cancer scare, now recycled for a new audience. "Show time," I whispered, stepping into view. Brandon froze. Linda's hand flew to her chest, her signature move when feeling faint. "Joy?" Brandon's voice cracked. "What are you doing here?" "Enjoying my prize. The question is, what are you doing here, with her?" Linda swayed dramatically. "Brandon, I'm feeling dizzy." "Drop the act, Linda." Tom emerged from the shadows. "We've seen this performance before." The color drained from Linda's face. "Tom, Brandon, what's happening?" "That's what I'd like to know." Brandon looked between us, lost. "Why are you both?" "Because someone needs to stop this." I opened the envelope. "Remember these, Linda? The psychiatric referrals you ignored? The ones from right before Robert's death?" Linda straightened, her fragility act forgotten. "Those are private." "Like the private accounts Brandon's been funding? Or the private conversations about the condo?" "Joy, please." Brandon stepped forward. "This isn't the place." "It's exactly the place. Where else could I get you both away from your carefully constructed reality?" "You're making a scene," Linda hissed. "No, I'm making a point." I turned to Brandon. "Your father died because of her manipulation. Tom left because he couldn't take it anymore. And now you're throwing away our marriage for what? Another of her fabricated emergencies?" Brandon's phone buzzed. Probably the front desk about the surprise celebration. He ignored it, staring at the medical files in my hands. "Mom?" His voice was small, uncertain. "What are they talking about?" Linda's mask cracked. "They're trying to turn you against me, just like Tom did. Just like your father." "Don't you dare mention Dad," Tom snapped. "You killed him with your games." "I loved him." "You consumed him," I corrected. "Like you're consuming Brandon." Brandon stepped back, shaking his head. "This isn't... I can't..." "Choose Brandon," I said quietly. "Right here, right now. Your mother's lies or the truth." Linda grabbed his arm. "I'm your mother. I need you..." "No," I cut in. "You want him. There's a difference." Brandon looked at the files, at his brother, at me. For a moment, I saw clarity in his eyes. Then Linda collapsed. Not her usual delicate swoon, but a full theatrical fall. Brandon caught her automatically, years of conditioning taking over. "Mom! Mom! Call an ambulance!" Linda gasped. My heart... I watched Brandon transform back into the dutiful son, all clarity vanishing as he cradled his mother. Tom's hand found my shoulder. "Joy, don't..." I stepped back, something breaking inside me. I'm done. Brandon looked up, torn. Joy, please, I have to. Take care of her, I know. I dropped the medical files at his feet. You always do. Linda's eyes met mine through her performance, triumphant. She'd won again. I turned away, my carefully planned confrontation crumbling like sand. Behind me, I heard Brandon calling for help. Linda's theatrical moans, Tom's disgusted sigh. In my pocket, my phone buzzed with a text from Grace. How did it go? I watched the golden sunset fade to purple, thinking of all the years I'd wasted fighting a battle that was rigged from the start. Some people don't want to be saved from their demons. Sometimes they prefer the familiar chains to uncertain freedom. It's over, I typed back. Time to let go. The ambulance sirens wailed in the distance, a fitting soundtrack to the death of my marriage. I walked away from the scene, leaving Brandon to his chosen fate. Behind me, Linda's performance reached its crescendo, but I didn't look back. Some victories only come through surrender. The emergency room buzzed with fluorescent intensity as I strode past the nurse's station. Linda's latest performance had landed her in the cardiac ward, though her preliminary tests showed nothing wrong. Of course. I found her alone in room 412, Brandon presumably off fetching her another blanket or ice chip or whatever else she'd demanded. She looked smaller in the hospital bed, more vulnerable, but her eyes were sharp as ever when they met mine. Come to gloat, she asked. No, I came to give you this. I placed a worn leather journal on her bedside table. Found it in Robert's old briefcase. Tom kept it all these years. Linda's hand trembled as she reached for it. Robert's diary? His suicide note, essentially. Every manipulation, every fake illness, every financial drain, he documented it all. Right up until the day his heart gave out. She withdrew her hand as if burned. You're lying. Read it yourself. Page 47 is particularly interesting. The day you first mentioned that non-existent lump. The hospital machinery beeped steadily as Linda stared at the journal. You don't understand what it's like, she whispered, to watch your children slip away, to feel yourself becoming unnecessary. So you make yourself necessary through lies? Through emotional blackmail? I keep my family close. You keep them trapped, and now you're doing it to Brandon. She lifted her chin. Brandon loves me. Brandon fears you. There's a difference. I moved closer. But here's what you should fear. I'm filing for divorce tomorrow. I'm taking what's left of our money, all traceable to your fake emergencies. And this journal, copies are going to Brandon's therapist and lawyer. He'll never believe. Maybe not at first, but seeds of doubt are funny things. They grow. Just ask Tom. Footsteps approached, Brandon returning. Linda's face contorted with panic. What do you want? She hissed. Get help, real help, the kind those psychiatric referrals suggested years ago, or I'll make sure Brandon sees exactly what happened to his father. Brandon appeared in the doorway, clutching a cup of ice chips. He froze, looking between us. Everything okay? He asked cautiously. I turned to leave, but Linda's voice stopped me. Wait. She was crying now, real tears this time. Brandon, there's something I need to tell you. I watched the scene unfold, Linda confessing to her lies, Brandon's face crumpling as she described the years of manipulation. The truth about his father's death, the fabricated illnesses, the financial destruction. I couldn't bear to lose you too, she finished. Brandon sat heavily in the visitor's chair, his world reshaping itself around this new reality. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow. All this time, I'm sorry, Linda whispered. I'll get help. I promise. Just don't leave me alone. Brandon looked at me, then back at his mother. I saw the choice weighing on him, the same choice his father never got to make. You won't be alone, Mom, he said finally, but you need help, professional help, and I need time. He stood up, shoulders straight for the first time in years. Joy, I'll be at Grace's, I said softly, when you're ready to talk. Linda called out as I reached the door. I really am sorry, for everything. I turned back one last time. I know, that's why I brought the journal instead of sending it straight to Brandon. Everyone deserves one chance to choose truth over lies. In the hallway, Tom waited by the elevator. How'd it go? Better than revenge, I said. She's finally facing herself. And Brandon? I watched through the window as Brandon held his mother's hand, both of them crying now, not from manipulation, but from truth. He's facing himself too. Sometimes that's the hardest battle of all. The elevator doors opened. As we stepped in, I heard Linda ask for her psychiatrist referral papers. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't in destroying your enemy, but in helping them find their way back to humanity, even if that means letting go of your own need for revenge. The Italian sun warmed my face as I sipped espresso at the small cafe in Florence. Grace had insisted on this trip. Healing through carbs, she called it. My phone buzzed with a text from Tom, a photo of Linda at her therapy session. Actually showing up this time. Progress, however small. Another postcard? Grace nodded at the blank card on our table. Last one. I'd been writing them throughout our trip, not to send, but to say the things I needed to say. This one was for Brandon. The waiter brought our bill just as my phone buzzed again. Brandon's name lit up the screen, his first contact since signing the divorce papers 3 weeks ago. The condo sale went through, his message read, using the money for Mom's treatment instead. I set the phone down, letting the weight of those words settle. No accusations, no guilt trips, just truth. The one thing that had been missing from our marriage for so long. You okay? Grace asked. Better than okay? I picked up my pen, finally knowing what to write on that last postcard. Not about revenge or justice or even forgiveness. Something simpler, more honest. A shadow fell across our table. I looked up to find Adam, his familiar pragmatic smile somehow softer in the Tuscan light. Fancy meeting you here, he said. Grace's eyes widened. Did you? I might have mentioned our itinerary to him, I admitted. Sometimes the best way forward is with someone who saw you clearly all along. Adam pulled up a chair, ordered an espresso in surprisingly decent Italian. We talked about everything and nothing. Work, travel, the way life surprises you when you stop trying to control it. My phone buzzed one more time, a message from Linda. Thank you for the journal, for giving me a chance to choose differently. I thought about revenge, about how I'd wanted to destroy her, to make her feel as trapped as I had. But in the end, the greatest victory wasn't in tearing someone down. It was in finding the strength to walk away, to let them face their own demons while you face your future. There's this little vineyard in Chianti, Adam said, his knee brushing mine under the table. If you're interested. Grace kicked me softly, grinning. I looked at the postcard, still blank except for Brandon's name. What do you say to someone who is both your greatest love and your hardest lesson? In the end, I wrote just 3 words. Choose yourself first. The waiter returned with Adam's coffee, asking if we needed anything else. I caught my reflection in the window, no longer the woman who'd won that Napa Valley trip, desperate to save a marriage that was already gone. Someone stronger now. Someone who understood that sometimes the happy ending isn't about winning or losing, but about finding the courage to write your own story. Actually, I said, both to the waiter and to whatever twist of fate had brought me here, we'll take another round. We're celebrating. What are we celebrating? Adam asked. I tucked the postcard into my bag, unsigned. Some words don't need to be sent to be heard. New chapters, I said, raising my cup. And the art of letting go. Grace and Adam lifted their cups too, the afternoon sun turning everything to gold. Somewhere back home, Brandon was learning to set boundaries, Linda was facing her fears in therapy, and Tom was rebuilding bridges he'd thought forever burned. And here, in this moment, I was exactly where I needed to be. Not because I'd won or lost, but because I'd finally understood that the greatest act of revenge against a life that's trapped you is to simply set yourself free. The espresso was bitter and perfect on my tongue, tasting like truth, like possibility, like the kind of peace that comes not from victory, but from finally, completely, letting go.
The pink onesie feels like a slap across my face. I stare at the delicate embroidery. Emma, written in perfect cursive, and something cold settles in my stomach. Our son Noah is barely 2 weeks old. Do you like it? Ryan asks, his smile too bright, too eager. He's standing in our bedroom doorway, watching me unwrap his special gift with those earnest blue eyes, that used to make me melt. Now they just make me want to scream. I'm Victoria, and 5 minutes ago I thought I had a perfect life. It's pink, I manage, my fingers tracing the letters. Each loop of the E feels like a knife twisting deeper. And it says Emma. Oh! Ryan's face drops for a split second before he recovers. Must be a mix-up at the store. I'll return it tomorrow. I fold the onesie carefully, methodically, buying time while my mind races. The embroidery is custom. You had to special order this. Come on, Vic. I've been working 60-hour weeks. I probably grabbed the wrong package at the boutique. He crosses the room, reaching for the gift box. Give it here. I'll sort it out. I pull back, clutching the onesie to my chest. Who's Emma? Jesus, you're being paranoid. He laughs, but it sounds hollow. Sleep deprivation getting to you? From the nursery, Noah starts crying. Ryan immediately backs toward the door. I should check on him. I just fed him. He's fine. My voice comes out steadier than I feel. Who is Emma, Ryan? He runs a hand through his perfectly styled hair. A tell I've learned means he's scrambling for words. This is ridiculous. I made a mistake with a baby gift. That's all. You don't make mistakes like this. I stand up, still holding the onesie. You're the most detail-oriented person I know. It's why you're the top realtor at your firm. You triple-check everything. Maybe I'm slipping. He flashes that winning smile that closes million-dollar deals. Having a newborn does that to you. Does what? Makes you order pink clothes with another baby's name for your son? The crying from the nursery gets louder. Ryan gestures toward the sound. He needs us. Answer me! There's nothing to answer! He snaps, facade cracking. You're turning a simple mix-up into some kind of conspiracy theory. This isn't healthy, Vic. I walk to his closet, yanking open the drawer where he keeps his receipts. Another habit of his obsessive organization. The boutique receipt is right on top, dated 3 days ago. Custom embroidery for a pink onesie, size 003 months. You ordered this deliberately. My voice shakes now. Why? He grabs the receipt from my hand, crumpling it. Stop this. You're being hysterical. Hysterical? I laugh, and it sounds slightly unhinged even to my ears. Our son is 2 weeks old, and you're buying baby clothes for someone named Emma. What am I supposed to think? Nothing. You're supposed to think nothing because there's nothing to think about. He's shouting now, matching Noah's wails. This is exactly why I've been working late. You've been impossible since the baby came. The words hit like a physical blow. I step back, bumping into his dresser. A frame tips over, our wedding photo. 3 years ago, both of us beaming at the camera, so sure of our future. How long? I whisper. How long what? How long have you been lying to me? He stares at me for a long moment, jaw working. Then he turns and walks out, calling over his shoulder. I'm going to check on my son. When you've calmed down, we can discuss your paranoid delusions. I watch him go, still clutching the pink onesie. Through the wall, I hear him cooing to Noah, his voice gentle and loving, everything a father should be. But all I can see is that name, Emma, mocking me with its perfect stitches, unraveling everything I thought I knew about my life. I sit on the edge of our bed, smoothing the soft fabric across my lap. Somewhere in this city, there's another nursery being prepared. Another woman expecting a baby girl. And my husband knows exactly who she is. 3 days after finding the pink onesie, I'm sitting across from Linda at her kitchen table, watching her hands shake as she pours tea. The china cup rattles against its saucer, the good set she only brings out for serious conversations. Ryan's been different lately, I say, measuring each word. Have you noticed? Linda's eyes dart to the window, then back to me. Different how? Working late, distracted. He bought... I stop, my throat tight. He ordered baby clothes, pink ones, with another name on them. The teacup freezes halfway to her lips. Something flickers across her face. Not surprise, I realize with a cold certainty. Recognition. Victoria, dear. She sets the cup down without drinking. Marriage isn't always easy. especially with a new baby. That's not an answer. She smooths the tablecloth, a nervous gesture I've never seen before. What exactly are you asking me? I'm asking if you know something about Ryan, about. I force the name out. Emma. The color drains from her face. I think you should talk to Ryan about this. I tried. He called me paranoid, hysterical. My laugh comes out bitter. Blamed it on postpartum hormones. Linda stands abruptly, busying herself at the sink. Men can be insensitive sometimes. When Tom and I were first married. Please don't. My voice cracks. Don't make excuses for him. Just tell me the truth. She turns, and I see tears in her eyes. What truth would help right now? What could I possibly say that wouldn't make things worse? The confirmation in her evasion hits me like a physical blow. You knew he was. I can't finish the sentence. I suspected. She whispers it like a confession. The way he talked about his new interior designer at work. How defensive he got when Tom mentioned seeing him downtown with a woman last month. My hands curl into fists under the table. Last month? When I was 8 months pregnant? I told myself I was imagining things, that Ryan would never. She breaks off, wiping her eyes. He's my son. I wanted to believe the best. And what about me? The words taste like ash. Aren't I your daughter too? 3 years of Sunday dinners and holiday traditions, and you just watched him lie to me? Victoria! The front door opens, and Tom's voice booms through the house. Linda, is that Victoria's car outside? Linda's eyes go wide with panic. Please, she whispers. Don't tell Tom. He'll never forgive Ryan. I stand up so quickly, my chair scrapes against the floor. Maybe Ryan doesn't deserve forgiveness. Tom appears in the doorway, his usual stern expression softening at the sight of me. Where's my grandson? With Ryan. My voice sounds strange to my own ears. Having father-son bonding time. Everything all right? Tom's lawyer instincts kick in, reading the tension in the room. You both look. Fine. Linda cuts in too quickly. Just discussing new mother things. You know how overwhelming it can be. I stare at her, this woman who welcomed me into her family, who held my hand through labor, who's now choosing to protect her son's lies instead of my truth. Actually, I was just leaving. Stay for dinner, Tom insists. Ryan can bring Noah over. We'll make it a family night. Family! The word echoes hollowly. What kind of family builds itself on secrets and silence? I can't! I grab my purse, needing to escape before I scream or cry or both. Noah has a doctor's appointment. On a Sunday! Tom's eyebrows furrow. I meant tomorrow. I need to prepare. I'm already moving toward the door. Thank you for the tea, Linda. She calls after me. Victoria, wait! But I'm already gone, practically running to my car. Inside, I grip the steering wheel until my knuckles turn white, trying to steady my breathing. My phone buzzes. A text from Ryan. Where are you? Noah's fussy. I stare at the message, remembering all the times he texted me from work these past months. Was he with her then? Planning for their baby while I carried his son? Another text appears. Mom says you were just there. Everything okay? I switch off my phone and start the car. Linda chose her side. Now I need to choose mine. And Ryan's about to learn that calling his wife paranoid was the biggest mistake of his life. Ryan's phone lies heavy in my palm at 3 a.m. He's in the shower. His third night shower this week, always after those late client meetings. The lock screen shows Noah's face, a perfect mask of fatherly devotion. I know his password, have known it for years. His birthday backwards. So predictable for someone who thinks he's clever. My fingers shake as I type it in. The messages load instantly. Hundreds of them, all to someone saved as C Interior Design. My throat closes as I scroll, each text a fresh wound. Miss you already. Can't wait to feel her kick again. Our little Emma's going to be perfect. Pictures follow. A nursery in progress. Walls half painted in soft pink. Chloe. I recognize her from Ryan's office party last year. Standing sideways, hand on her pregnant belly. Ryan's arm around her waist, his smile brighter than any he's given me since Noah was born. The shower stops. I should put the phone down, pretend I never saw, but my fingers keep scrolling, desperate for the full scope of his betrayal. A video starts playing before I can stop it. Chloe's voice fills the silence. "Say hi to Daddy." I fumble to mute it, but Ryan's already opening the bathroom door. Steam billows out behind him as he freezes, seeing his phone in my hands. "What are you doing?" I hold up the screen, showing him the paused video. "Meeting clients at midnight, Ryan?" He grabs for the phone, but I pull back. "You're going through my private messages? That's illegal." "Illegal?" I laugh, the sound sharp and foreign. "You want to talk about wrong choices? Give me the phone, Victoria." "How far along is she?" His jaw clenches. "You're being 7 months?" I cut him off. "That's what the messages say, which means while I was dealing with morning sickness, you were getting her pregnant. It's not that simple." "Really?" "Because the math seems pretty straightforward." He runs a hand through his wet hair, water dripping onto his shoulders. "I was going to tell you." "When? After Emma was born? Or were you planning to keep your second family secret forever?" "Lower your voice," he hisses. "You'll wake Noah." "Now you care about Noah?" I stand up, phone clutched to my chest. "Where was that concern when you were playing house with your designer?" "I never stopped caring about Noah." He steps closer, voice dropping to that soothing tone he uses on nervous clients. "Or you. Things just happened." "Things happened?" My voice rises despite his warning. "You accidentally fell into another woman? Accidentally got her pregnant? Accidentally ordered matching baby clothes? Give me the phone and we can discuss this rationally." "Like you rationally discussed it with your mother." He stills. "What?" "Linda knows. She's been covering for you." The betrayal tastes bitter on my tongue. "Your whole family's been watching you destroy ours." "That's not—" He lunges suddenly, grabbing for the phone. I stumble backward, hitting the dresser. The wedding photo crashes to the floor, glass shattering. Noah's cry pierces the air. "Now look what you did!" Ryan snaps, reaching for the phone again. I dodge him, running for the nursery. "Don't you dare blame this on me!" He follows, but I'm already at Noah's crib, scooping up our son. "Stay back." "You're being hysterical." He holds out his hand. "Give me the phone, take care of Noah, and we can talk about this tomorrow when you're calmer." "Calmer?" I clutch Noah closer as he whimpers. "You have another baby on the way, and you want me to be calm." "It was a mistake." "Which part? Getting her pregnant or getting caught?" His face hardens. "You really want to do this now?" "Fine. Yes, Chloe's pregnant. Yes, it's mine. I didn't plan it, but I'm not walking away from my daughter." The casual cruelty of his honesty stuns me silent. "I still love you," he continues, softer now. "We can work through this, for Noah's sake." I look down at our son, his tiny face scrunched in confusion at the tension around him. Then at Ryan's phone, still displaying evidence of his other life, his other child. "You're right," I say finally. "We should discuss this tomorrow." Relief floods his face as I hold out the phone, but as his fingers close around it, I meet his eyes. "And Ryan, pack a bag. You're not sleeping here tonight." "Victoria." "Or I'll send these messages to every contact in your phone, including your clients." I turn away, focusing on soothing Noah. "Your choice." Behind me, I hear him curse softly, then the sound of drawers opening. I keep my back turned until the front door clicks shut, leaving me alone with our son and the shattered remains of our marriage. Tom's law office feels like a confessional, all dark wood and heavy silence. He studies the photos on his desk, screenshots from Ryan's phone that I printed this morning. Each image lands like a gavel strike. The nursery, the ultrasound, the intimate moments I was never meant to see. 7 months, Tom says finally, his lawyer's composure cracking. "While you were carrying his son." I twist my wedding ring, a nervous habit I can't shake. "Linda knew." "Linda?" His head snaps up. "My Linda?" "She suspected, chose to stay quiet." The betrayal still tastes bitter. To protect him, Tom stands abruptly, pacing behind his desk. That's why she's been acting strange. All those whispered phone calls. He stops, facing the window. I saw them, Ryan and this woman, downtown, outside that new French restaurant. When? 3 months ago. He said she was a client. A harsh laugh escapes him. I believed him, even when she touched his arm, laughed too loudly at his jokes. I convinced myself I was being paranoid. Ha! That seems to be going around. I pull out one final photo. Ryan and Chloe kissing in what looks like an office. He's been staging properties for her design company. Tom turns, his expression hardening. The Anderson project? The one that got him promoted? I nod. Apparently, sleeping with the interior designer has its perks. Son of a... He cuts himself off, lawyer mode engaging. Have you spoken to a divorce attorney? Not yet. I wanted to talk to you first. Smart girl. He sits back down, pulling out a legal pad. Ryan's name is on the house deed, but with proof of infidelity and the timing with Noah's birth. We can... I don't want his money. The words come out sharper than intended. I want him to feel what I'm feeling, to lose everything like I did. Tom's pen stills. Revenge won't give you peace, Victoria. Neither will letting him walk away to his perfect new family. No. He sets the pen down carefully. But it might give Noah a chance at having his father in his life. His father? I laugh bitterly. You mean the man who's building a nursery across town while I'm up all night with his son? Who's picking out names for his daughter while telling me I'm paranoid for questioning him? Victoria! A knock interrupts us. Linda appears in the doorway, her face falling as she sees me. I didn't know you had a client. Not a client. Tom's voice is ice. Our daughter-in-law, showing me some interesting photos of our son. Linda pales. Tom, I can explain. Can you? He stands again, trembling with barely contained rage. Explain why you kept this from me? From Victoria? I thought... She steps into the office, closing the door. I thought if I gave him time, he'd end it, come to his senses. And when he didn't? I ask quietly. When you found out about the baby? Tears spill down her cheeks. I'm so sorry. I was trying to protect everyone. By protecting him, Tom corrects. Always him, even now. He's our son. And what about our grandson? Tom's voice rises. What about Victoria? When did they stop deserving protection? Linda collapses into a chair, sobbing. I didn't know what to do. He's always been so fragile, ever since Mark. Don't. Tom cuts her off sharply. Don't use his brother's death to excuse this. I look between them, sensing an old wound reopening. What about Mark? Ryan's older brother, Tom says after a long pause, died in a car accident when Ryan was 16. Linda's been overprotective ever since. He needed me, Linda whispers. And now he needs consequences. Tom returns to his desk, pulling out more papers. Victoria, I'm going to give you some names. Excellent divorce attorneys. But first, he fixes me with a stern look. What exactly do you want? I think of Noah, sleeping peacefully at the neighbor's house. Of Ryan's smug certainty that I'd never leave him. Of Linda's tears and misplaced loyalty. I want him to lose everything, I say slowly. His reputation, his promotion, his perfect image. I want everyone to see him for what he really is. Tom nods, understanding darkening his features. Then we'll need a plan, one that can't be traced back to you. Linda makes a small broken sound. You're going to help her destroy our son? No, Tom replies, already writing. I'm going to help her survive him. The weight of their broken family settles around us like dust, and I realize there's no going back now. Ryan's not the only one with secrets anymore. Chloe's design studio looks exactly like her Instagram photos, all clean lines and muted pastels. I watch through the window as she moves between fabric samples, one hand absently rubbing her pregnant belly. Ryan's baby. My replacement family. Tom's words echo in my head. Are you sure about this? But I'm already pushing open the door, setting off a delicate wind chime. Chloe turns, professional smile freezing as recognition hits. Victoria, you know who I am. It's not a question. She straightens, protective hands crossing over her stomach. Ryan told me you might come. Did he tell you about Noah too? Or did that detail slip his mind? Color drains from her face. I don't want any trouble. Funny, neither did I. I move closer, studying the ultrasound photo pinned to her mood board. Emma's a beautiful name. Please leave. Her voice shakes. I'll call security. Go ahead. I'm sure they'd love to hear how you and Ryan secured the Anderson contract. Those late-night design meetings must have been very productive. She sinks into a chair, defeat replacing fear. You don't understand. Try me, he said. She swallows hard. He said you were separated, that you'd agreed to divorce months ago, but wanted to wait until after the baby, after Noah was born. I laugh, sharp and hollow. And you believed him? He showed me papers, said you'd signed them. What papers? She reaches for her phone, hands trembling as she pulls up photos. Divorce papers, dated 6 months ago, with what looks like my signature at the bottom. My stomach lurches. That's forged. What? I never signed anything. I grab her phone, zooming in. He copied my signature from our mortgage documents. Chloe makes a small, broken sound. No, he wouldn't. Like he wouldn't sleep with his interior designer while his wife was pregnant? Like he wouldn't build a nursery across town for his second child? Stop! She stands abruptly, swaying slightly. You need to go. Why? Because the truth hurts? Because I'm having contractions. The words hit like a slap. I look closer. Her face is pale, beaded with sweat. You're only 7 months. 7.5. She grips the desk. And this isn't the first time. Doctor said stress could trigger early labor. Something shifts in my chest. Not quite sympathy, but recognition. Another woman trapped in Ryan's web of lies. Do you need a hospital? I need you to leave. Tears streak her makeup. Please, I can't. I can't process this right now. My phone buzzes. Ryan's name on the screen. Of course he knows I'm here. Probably has someone watching the studio. He's calling you too, isn't he? Chloe asks quietly. I show her my screen. She turns her phone around. Same caller. Perfect, Ryan, I say bitterly, always trying to control everything. Everyone, she corrects, then doubles over with another contraction. I should leave. Let her deal with the consequences of sleeping with a married man. Let Ryan clean up his own mess. Instead, I find myself moving forward, supporting her weight. Where's your hospital bag? What? You're in premature labor. You need medical attention. The words taste like ash, but I continue. I'm taking you to the hospital. Why would you help me? Because I know what it's like to be pregnant and scared. Because Emma deserves better than her father's lies. Because revenge doesn't taste as sweet when there's an innocent life at stake. I don't say any of this. Instead, I grab her bag from behind the desk, already packed, another sign of her high-risk pregnancy, and guide her toward the door. Victoria? Her voice is small, pained. There's something else you should know. About Ryan. About why he… My phone buzzes again. This time it's Tom. Don't do anything rash. New information about Ryan's past. Call me immediately. But Chloe's gripping my arm, face contorted in pain. And whatever secrets are lurking in Ryan's history will have to wait. Tell me later, I say, helping her to my car. Right now, we need to make sure Emma's okay. As we drive away, I catch a glimpse of a familiar car in the rearview mirror. Ryan's BMW, turning into the studio parking lot. Let him wonder where we've gone. Let him feel what it's like to be powerless for once. Besides, I think grimly, steering toward the hospital, there's more than one way to destroy a man's carefully constructed lies. Sometimes the best revenge is simply letting the truth come to light on its own. The hospital waiting room feels like purgatory. I've been here 6 hours, watching doctors rush past, ignoring Ryan's increasingly frantic calls. Tom's message still burns in my mind. New information about Ryan's past. Chloe's in emergency surgery. Placental abruption, they said. Critical, but stable. Mrs. Sanders? I look up. A nurse stands there, clipboard in hand. I'm not her family. You're listed as her emergency contact. She consults her notes. Added this afternoon. Before I can process this, Ryan bursts through the doors, Linda trailing behind him. He spots me and freezes. Where is she? Surgery. My voice sounds distant, hollow. They're trying to save your daughter. Linda makes a small, broken sound. Ryan steps forward, face twisted with something between rage and fear. This is your fault, if you hadn't upset her. My fault. I stand, weeks of anger suddenly boiling over. You forged divorce papers, you built a life on lies, and you dare blame me? What papers? Linda asks, but Ryan talks over her. I was going to tell you everything, after Emma. After what? After you had your perfect new family? Your do-over baby? Don't. His voice drops dangerously. Don't talk about Emma like that. Why not? Isn't that what this is about? Replacing your brother's memory with a daughter named after him? The words hang in the air like smoke. Linda gasps. Ryan's face goes white. Tom told you. No. I laugh bitterly. Chloe did, right before she started bleeding. Told me all about how you convinced her to name the baby Emma, after your brother Mark's daughter, the one who died with him in that car crash. Ryan grabs my arm, fingers digging in. You don't know what you're talking about. Let go of her. Tom's voice cuts through the tension. He stands in the doorway, holding a manila envelope. Or should we add assault to the list of charges? Charges? Linda steps between us. What charges? Tom opens the envelope, pulling out documents. Fraud, for starters. Those forged divorce papers. Then there's the Anderson contract. Interesting how it was awarded right after you started sleeping with the interior designer. You can't prove anything, Ryan snarls, but his grip loosens. Actually, I can. I pull out my phone, playing a recording. Chloe's voice fills the space. He showed me papers, said you'd signed them. Ryan lunges for the phone, but Tom blocks him. That's inadmissible. In court, maybe. Tom's voice is ice. But I'm sure the ethics board would be interested, and your clients, and the press. A doctor appears, still in surgical scrubs. Family of Chloe Mitchell? Ryan turns, mask of concern sliding back into place. I'm the father. The baby's stable, but critical. We had to deliver early. Ms. Mitchell is asking for Victoria. Me? I blink. Why? Because. Chloe's lawyer steps into the waiting room, another envelope in hand. She's naming Victoria as Emma's guardian, in case anything happens. The room spins. Ryan makes a sound like he's been punched. She can't do that, he protests. I'm the father. An unmarried father, the lawyer corrects, who committed fraud and whose name isn't on any prenatal documents. Ms. Mitchell's wishes are quite clear. I stare at the papers being thrust into my hands. Guardian. For my husband's daughter with another woman. The revenge I wanted now feels like ashes in my mouth. Victoria, Ryan's voice breaks. Please, she's my daughter. My chance to make things right. Right? I turn to him, seeing him clearly for the first time. Not a monster, just a broken man trying to rebuild his life with lies. You can't replace what you lost, Ryan. Not with Emma, not with Noah, not with any number of perfect families. The doctor clears his throat. Ms. Mitchell is waiting. I look at the papers in my hands, then at Linda's tears, Tom's grim determination, Ryan's desperation. 3 weeks ago, I had a perfect life. Now I'm standing in a hospital, holding guardianship papers for my husband's premature daughter, while my newborn son sleeps at home with a neighbor. Take me to Chloe, I say finally. As I follow the doctor, I hear Ryan collapse into a chair. Linda's soft consolations, Tom's heavy sigh. The weight of their broken family, our broken family, settles onto my shoulders like a shroud. Some revenge stories, I'm learning, have no winners, only survivors. Chloe's hospital room is dimly lit, machines beeping steadily. She looks small against the white sheets, nothing like the confident woman from her design studio. Emma? Her voice cracks. Stable, in NICU. I hover by the door, unsure of my place in this twisted scenario. Why me? For guardianship? Because you'll protect her. She shifts, wincing. From him, from becoming another replacement. The door opens. Ryan stands there, looking wrecked. Chloe, please! Don't! She tries to sit up, monitor alarms spiking. You lied to me, about everything. I loved you, love you both. Like you loved your brothers Emma? The words hit him like physical blows. Tell her, Ryan. Tell Victoria about the first Emma. He grabs the doorframe, knuckles white. This isn't the time. My daughter's fighting for her life because of your lies. Chloe's voice strengthens with anger. Tell her why you really chose me, why you needed another Emma. I watch him crumble, the perfect facade finally shattering. Mark was driving. The night of the accident. My niece Emma was in the back seat. Ryan! Linda appears behind him, reaching out. He jerks away. I was supposed to be there, was supposed to pick them up, but I had a date. Mark covered for me, like always. The perfect older brother, Chloe says bitterly. Until he wasn't. I saw Chloe at a client meeting. Ryan's words tumble out now, unstoppable. She looked like Mark's wife. Same smile. When she said she'd always wanted a daughter. You saw your chance, I finish. To rewrite history. I could make it right. Give Emma the life she lost. By lying? Chloe's monitor spikes again. By manipulating me? Creating some sick replacement family while your wife carried your son? I never meant to get caught. Tom's voice cuts through. He enters, holding more papers. The ethics board disagreed. They've suspended your license pending investigation. Ryan spins toward him. You didn't. I did. Tom's face is stone. Someone had to stop this madness. It's not madness, Ryan shouts. It's fixing things, making them right. By destroying more lives? I step between him and Chloe's bed. Noah and Emma deserve better than being pieces in your redemption story. Noah, he laughs, hollow. The son I never wanted? Another replacement? Courtesy of your biological clock? The room goes silent. Linda gasps. There it is. My voice is steady, surprising me. The truth, finally. Victoria. He reaches for me, but I step back. No. You don't get to touch me, not after that. I turn to Chloe. I accept the guardianship for both children. What? Ryan lunges forward. Tom catches his arm. Joint custody, I continue, between me and Chloe, once she's recovered. You can't. We can. Chloe's lawyer appears, right on cue. The papers are filed. Given the circumstances, the fraud, the ethics violation, your documented instability, I'm their father. A father who sees his children as replacements for his dead niece. Tom's voice cracks like a whip. The court will love that. Ryan crumples into a chair, head in his hands. Linda moves to comfort him, but stops, torn between her son and the wreckage he's created. Get out! Chloe's voice is weak but firm. All of you, except Victoria. They file out, Tom steering Ryan, Linda lingering at the door before following. The lawyer nods, promising to return later. In the sudden quiet, Chloe's monitors steady. I'm sorry, she whispers. For what? Falling for his lies. Helping him hurt you. You were manipulated. We both were. I sink into the chair beside her bed. But our children won't be. She reaches for my hand, surprising me. Noah and Emma. Real people, not replacements. Real siblings, I correct, surprising myself more. Whether Ryan likes it or not. Outside the room, I hear Ryan's broken sobs, Linda's soft murmurs, Tom's firm voice handling details. The family I thought I had crumbling, while something new and unexpected takes shape in its place. Victoria? Chloe's grip tightens. Promise me something? What? Help me make sure Emma knows her own story, not the one Ryan tried to write for her. I think of Noah at home, of the pink onesie that started this all, of the twisted path that led us here. I promise, they'll both know the truth, the real story. Not a revenge story after all, but something more complicated. A story of healing, maybe, of choosing truth over perfect lies. The pink onesie sits on my kitchen table, next to divorce papers and custody agreements. 3 weeks since the hospital, since everything changed. Noah sleeps in his bassinet nearby, while I pack the last of Ryan's things. The doorbell rings. Linda stands there, looking older than I've ever seen her. He's in therapy, she says without preamble. Grief counseling. For Mark, finally. Good. I mean it, surprisingly. Come in. Noah just ate. She hesitates at the threshold. I wasn't sure I'd be welcome. You're still his grandmother. I step aside. And Emma's too, if you want to be. Her eyes fill with tears. How is she? Getting stronger? Chloe's moving into the guest house next week. I lead her to the kitchen. The doctors say Emma can come home soon. Linda spots the onesie, reaching for it with trembling fingers. I remember when the first Emma wore something like this. I'm not trying to replace her. The words come out sharper than intended. Neither of them are replacements. I know. She sets the onesie down carefully. That's why I trust you with them both. The front door opens. Tom, carrying moving boxes. He pauses, seeing Linda, then continues to Ryan's office. We listen to him work in silence. I found this. Linda pulls out an old photo. Mark and Ryan at the lake house. Before everything. 2 brothers grin at the camera, arms around each other. Ryan looks young, unburdened, happy. He was different then, Linda whispers. After the accident, he just stopped dealing with it, started trying to fix everything instead. By controlling it. Yes. She touches the photo gently. I enabled him. Thought if I just loved him enough, protected him enough. You can't fix someone by hiding their broken pieces. Tom returns, carrying Ryan's awards from the real estate firm. Where should these go? Storage, I decide, in case Noah or Emma want them someday. He nods, understanding what I'm not saying. Their father's legacy, complicated, painful, but still theirs to know. My phone buzzes. Chloe, sending a NICU photo. Emma's tiny hand wrapped around her finger. I show Linda, watching her face soften. She looks strong, Linda says, like her mother. Both her mothers, Tom corrects quietly. The doorbell rings again. This time it's Ryan, here for his boxes. He looks thinner, shadows under his eyes. I'll get the rest, Tom says, steering Linda toward the nursery, giving us space. Ryan spots the onesie, flinching. You kept it. For Emma, the real Emma. I fold it carefully. Not the one you imagined. He nods, throat working. The therapist says I've been chasing ghosts, trying to rewrite endings. And now? Now I'm trying to learn how to live with the real story. He picks up a box, pausing. Will you tell them about Mark someday? The good parts? Yes, when they're old enough to understand. That their father's broken? That everyone is, in different ways. I meet his eyes. It's what we do with our broken pieces that matters. He starts to reach for Noah's bassinet, then stops himself. I'd like to see them sometimes, when I'm better. We'll talk about it, with the lawyers and therapists. He accepts this with a nod, gathering his things. At the door, he turns back. I did love you, Victoria, just not enough to be honest, not enough to face the truth. He shifts the box. Take care of them? Always. After he leaves, I return to the kitchen. Linda and Tom are back, watching Noah sleep. The pink onesie lies between us, no longer a symbol of betrayal, but something else. A bridge, maybe, between past and future. We should go, Linda says reluctantly. Unless you need help. Actually, I pick up Noah, making a decision. Would you like to come to the hospital? Emma's having a good day. Chloe said we could visit. Linda's face lights up. Tom squeezes her hand. As we leave, I grab the onesie. Not for the ghost of a little girl lost years ago, but for the real Emma fighting to come home. For the complicated, imperfect family we're becoming. Sometimes revenge isn't about destroying someone's perfect lies. Sometimes it's about building something true from the wreckage they leave behind.
I'm Polly, a 38-year-old novelist who loves to write mysteries and leads the kind of life that many people only dream of. My books have devoted readers, and writing helps me provide for my family. Stephen, our 9-year-old son, and I have been married to Peter for 10 years. Peter worked when we first got married, but as my career took off, he left his job. He hasn't done anything for the past few years, usually spending his days playing pachinko. I recently learned of something unsettling. Peter has been dishonest, using my credit card to lavishly buy designer goods on someone else. For the sake of our son, I've tolerated his behavior, but I've had enough. It's time for a change. I can no longer wait. This shift was brought about by the most unlikely person, someone I never would have imagined coming to my support, stepping in to assist me. I saw Peter one day dressed absolutely out of character in a suit, which was unusual for him. I asked him about it, curious. He told me he was off to a job interview after initially appearing surprised. "It's time I started working again," he replied. I wanted to believe him, that at last he was considering how he could better himself for the future of our family. I wished him well and went back to work, realizing I had a deadline approaching. The hours passed, and Peter didn't come back until 2 in the morning. I realized at that moment that I couldn't let things stay the same because of the late hour and the enigmatic job interview, which left me with more questions than answers. For the sake of my future and that of our son, it was time to face the facts of our circumstances and make some difficult choices. Peter shambled in the door that evening, his breath heavy with perfume and vodka. Tired, or was he simply being irresponsible? He fell back on the living room sofa, his smartphone falling out of his palm but staying unlocked. I couldn't help but give in to my curiosity and suspicions. I grabbed his phone and quickly looked at it. Unquestionable evidence that my husband was having an extramarital affair with my best friend Nancy was what I discovered there, and it shocked me to my core. Only hours before, they'd been at an upscale restaurant with a stunning view of the night sky. It seemed like a bodily blow to be betrayed. How could I be subjected to this abuse by both Nancy and Peter, who were married? I suppressed my tears since I didn't want to wake Peter. I silently copied the damning pictures and texts to my phone. I had to gather myself and carefully consider what to do next. As if nothing had happened, I questioned Peter about his night the next morning. "Peter, let's talk about yesterday. Despite your claim to have had an interview, you arrived home somewhat late. What took place?" His eyes darted away, giving off an uneasy vibe as he searched for an explanation. "I ran into a friend after the interview, and we went out for drinks," he stated. He denied it when I questioned him about the identity of the acquaintance. "Catherine, just some dude. I mean, do I really need to explain everything?" I bit my frustration back and said nothing. His avoidance not only strengthened my resolve to deal with the problem as dignifiedly and strategically as possible, but it also reinforced my worst assumptions. It has been a month since that discovery, and Peter's treachery still carries a heavy burden. Since I know that confronting him could permanently damage our family, I haven't done so yet. If it were just me, I would have already shown him the proof and asked for a divorce. But because of our son and the complicated feelings he brings, I've had to carefully weigh every option, since I know that whatever I choose would have a lifelong impact on our family. The notion of taking my 9-year-old son Stephen away from his father was intolerable, even with all of the agony in my heart. Though he claimed that his frequent outings were to visit friends or decompress, in reality, they served as the ideal pretext for me to obtain proof of Peter's adultery, something I had been growing suspicious of. One day, seizing an opportunity while Peter was out, I rummaged through his belongings and found a stack of receipts for women's designer items, luxuries I certainly hadn't received. None of these high-end goods were in our home, leading me to one painful conclusion. Peter was lavishing these expensive gifts on Nancy, my so-called best friend. But the mystery deepened. How was Peter financing these extravagant purchases? He hadn't worked in years and was living off the modest allowance I gave him from my earnings. Concerned and needing answers, I devised a plan to follow him. I called my brother to watch Stephen, cloaking my real intentions under the guise of a shopping trip. "Hey, sorry to bother you out of the blue, but can you watch Stephen for a bit?" "I want to go shopping alone," I told him. My brother, puzzled because I usually preferred online shopping, raised an eyebrow. "Shopping? You've never been one to shop in person. What's up?" "Normally, yes, but today I need something from a store. Can you watch him for me?" I replied. He agreed, albeit with a reminder not to be gone long as Stephen might get lonely. With my brother's help, I was free to track Peter. I spotted him downtown, arm in arm with Nancy, strolling into a high-end designer store with unsettling familiarity. Watching them together, a mix of hurt and anger surged through me. As they approached the cashier, I saw something that truly shocked me. Peter was paying with a credit card. My heart sank as I realized it was my secondary credit card, the one I usually left in an unattended drawer at home. Peter had taken it without my knowledge. The betrayal was deeper and more complex than I had imagined. Witnessing it firsthand was painful, but armed me with the undeniable proof I needed. Now I had to decide what to do next, knowing that whatever steps I took would impact not just my life, but Stephen's as well. Over the past few months, while I was making significant purchases for my home office, including monitors, keyboards, and new furniture, I hadn't realized that Peter was exploiting this flurry of activity to cover his deceitful expenditures. Both our credit cards were linked to the same bank account, and amidst my hectic schedule, I hadn't scrutinized the statements closely enough. This oversight now haunted me as it became painfully clear. Not only was Peter unfaithful, but he was also misusing my funds to shower gifts on his mistress. Any remaining fondness I felt for my husband evaporated in the wake of this revelation. Although part of me blamed myself for not noticing earlier, I found it impossible to forgive his betrayal. I managed to snap some clear photos of Peter and Nancy together and headed home, my mind boiling with anger. In the following days, my thoughts turned to revenge. I frequently checked Peter's usual computer, knowing he left it unlocked and easily accessible when he wasn't around. Digging into his communications with Nancy, I soon discovered their plans for a romantic getaway to Kagoshima over the upcoming long weekend. A 5-day escape that seemed tailor-made for my plans of retribution. However, I faced a significant dilemma, ensuring my son Stephen remained shielded from the ugly truth about his father's actions. I reached out to my brother again, hoping he could help by looking after Stephen. "Hey bro, sorry to bother you again, but could you watch Stephen for me during the upcoming long weekend?" His response, though supportive, carried a hint of concern. "You mean for all 5 days?" he asked, sounding surprised. Before I could reply, he added firmly, "Catherine, stop trying to handle everything on your own. Peter's cheating on you, isn't he?" I was taken aback by his directness. "How did you know?" I asked, my voice a mixture of shock and curiosity. I heard it from Stephen, he revealed. Hearing my son's name in this context was a jolt. Despite his young age, Stephen had sensed something was amiss with his father. This complicated things further, as it meant Stephen was more aware of the situation than I had hoped. Now I had to navigate not only my response to Peter's betrayal, but also how to protect my son from the emotional fallout. I hadn't realized how much Peter's actions were affecting Stephen until my brother pointed it out. Despite my efforts to shield him, Stephen had picked up on the tension and pain in our household. As I was grappling with these revelations, Stephen, having overheard our conversation, came into the room. "Mom, it's okay. I'm on your side," he said with a clarity that belied his young age. "Are you sure, Stephen?" I asked, touched by his understanding and support. "I don't want anyone who makes Mom sad." "As long as I have you, I'm okay," he replied confidently. "Thank you, Stephen." "And thank you too, bro," I expressed, feeling a surge of gratitude for their support. Bolstered by the encouragement of my son and brother, I resolved to take decisive action against Peter's betrayal. We began planning our move to a new home to coincide with Peter's planned getaway with his mistress. With my brother's assistance, we discreetly packed our belongings whenever Peter was out. The night before the long weekend, as Peter buzzed with excitement for his upcoming trip, I decided it was time to confront him and perhaps give him one last chance to explain himself. "Peter, what's with the suitcase? Why are you packing?" I inquired as he shuffled things around. "Oh, this? I'm going on a trip with a friend starting tomorrow," he answered nonchalantly. "A trip? Did you mention anything about that?" It seems like a last-minute decision, I probed, hinting at my knowledge of his misuse of the allowance I gave him. My husband's annoyance was palpable as he tried to dismiss my questions. "Don't talk to me about it anymore, Catherine," he snapped. I lowered my voice, pressing him further. "Are you going on this trip with just a friend?" My tone caused him to flinch, his shoulders tensing as he realized the depth of my awareness. His reaction confirmed my suspicions, and I knew what I had to do next for myself and Stephen. Despite his obvious deceit, Peter tried to dismiss my concerns with a lie. "You've been nagging me a lot lately, Catherine," he said, trying to justify his secretive plans as a mere trip with a friend. "Have a good time." I retorted, my voice heavy with sarcasm. "Yeah, I'm excited for our new home," I said as I left the room. Deep down, if Peter had been honest with me, I might have considered resolving our issues more amicably, perhaps negotiating some alimony and child support even despite his infidelity. After all, there was a time when he was my pillar, supporting me when my novel struggled to find readers. I didn't want to hold on to hatred or resentment towards him. However, given the extent of his deception, I couldn't just stand by for the sake of my son and my future. Ending the relationship had become inevitable. There was no merit in preserving ties with someone so repeatedly dishonest. The next morning, by the time I woke up, Peter had already left for his trip. I checked the drawer immediately and, unsurprisingly, found my credit card missing. I promptly called the credit card company, reported the card as lost, and blocked any further transactions. As I was handling these logistics, my son Stephen woke up and greeted me with a bright smile. "Mom, today's the day, right?" he asked eagerly. "Huh?" I was momentarily confused. "We're moving to our new home today, right?" His eyes were alight with excitement. "That's right, Stephen. I've canceled the credit card, and now it's time for us to move on to our new home," I confirmed, feeling a mix of relief and anticipation. "Yeah, I'm excited for our new home," he exclaimed. With my brother's invaluable assistance, our move went smoothly. As we settled into our new environment, the sense of a fresh start was empowering. Stephen's enthusiasm and resilience reminded me that no matter how challenging the circumstances, a new beginning was not just possible, but also filled with potential. As we settled into our new home, I felt a sense of renewal wash over Stephen and me. Meanwhile, my husband's belongings were sent off to a location he had specified, marking a clear division in our lives. That tranquility was briefly interrupted the next day. While we relaxed in our new surroundings with my brother by our side for support, my phone rang. It was Peter. "Hello, Catherine. Is that you? Could you transfer me some money? I spent more than I planned, and now I need some extra cash," he said, clearly unaware that I had frozen the credit card he usually misused. "Didn't you say you were going to stick to your allowance?" I asked, my tone sharp. "Come on, don't say that. I can't enjoy my trip if you do that," he complained. "Aren't you with Nancy?" I retorted, cutting straight to the heart of the matter. Peter seemed taken aback. "What are you talking about? Who's Nancy? What's going on with the card? It's pointless to play dumb." "Your lies aren't working," I snapped, my patience worn thin. "It's clear you've been cheating on me with my best friend Nancy. Did you think you wouldn't get caught? This isn't what it looks like. It's not cheating." He tried to justify himself, his voice desperate. My anger flared, fueled by his feeble attempts to deflect blame. With my brother and son within earshot, I no longer held back my fury. "Stop making excuses. You have a family, yet you chose to have an affair and misuse someone else's credit card. Do you realize how low you've sunk?" "Catherine, let's calm down," Peter attempted to soothe the situation. "Calm down? How can I stay calm when I'm speaking to the person who betrayed his family so thoughtlessly?" My voice rose, an outpouring of emotions I had contained for far too long. The call ended with those unsparing words, leaving a heavy silence in the room. My brother placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder, and Stephen looked up at me, his young face a mixture of confusion and concern. This moment, painful as it was, marked the beginning of a new chapter for us, one where we could move forward from the deception and hurt. Overwhelmed with a mixture of disgust and resolve, I made my feelings brutally clear to Peter. "Let me make this clear. I have no intention of forgiving you or offering any help. You and the woman you cheated with can go straight to hell. Don't you dare show your face in front of me or Stephen ever again." With those final words, I hung up the phone, abruptly ending the call. Shortly after, Nancy, the woman he cheated with, called me. Her voice was tinged with demand. "Catherine, what are you doing?" she asked sharply. "Nancy, long time no see. How's your trip with your best friend's husband going?" I retorted, my words dripping with sarcasm. "Shut up. Explain yourself," she snapped back. "What are you talking about?" she asked, feigning ignorance. "Don't play dumb. You sent Peter's belongings to my house, didn't you?" During our move, I had strategically shipped all of Peter's belongings to Nancy's house, fully aware that she was the other woman. Since Nancy was married, her husband was bound to be at home when the delivery arrived. I had included a detailed letter explaining the situation, ensuring that her husband would understand the full extent of our spouse's betrayal. As I shouted at Nancy over the phone, barely containing my rage, she blurted out, "Are you serious?" "My husband found out, and he's furious." "Isn't that expected? You're having an affair even though you're married. My supposed best friend did such a disgraceful thing. You're the worst. I'm incredibly disappointed in you," I fired back. "Excuse me?" She responded, taken aback. "I think that's my line. You were the one having an affair with my husband. Do you think I'd forgive you for that? Who showed disrespect first, Nancy? I wasn't serious. It was just a fling." There's no way I'd settle for a jobless loser like him. She tried to minimize her actions. Whether you were serious or not doesn't matter to me, I replied coldly, cutting through her excuses. The betrayal had severed any ties of friendship we had, leaving only the stark reality of her deception. I informed her bluntly, "I'm divorcing Peter, and your affair is a fact that I won't forgive. I'll be demanding the maximum compensation from both of you, so be prepared." Compensation? I didn't agree to that. Why should I pay compensation? Nancy protested, her voice tinged with panic. "It's only natural. You did something that warrants it," I replied firmly. "But wait, I'm a housewife." "I can't afford to pay compensation," she stammered. "That's for you to figure out. Maybe you can ask your husband for help, though I doubt he'll be inclined to assist you now," I said coldly. "Wait a minute, Catherine, please," she began to plead, but I was done listening. "Goodbye," I said and hung up the phone, then promptly blocked her contact. I moved forward with the divorce proceedings through a lawyer, demanding compensation not just from my ex-husband Peter, but also from Nancy. I sought child support and reimbursement for the funds Peter had frivolously spent on my credit card. Nancy's spouse served her with divorce papers, as she was now facing debt from the compensation payments. Eventually, I've heard, they had to force her to leave their house. She tried to depend on her family, but that didn't work out, so she had to start working nights to make ends meet. Peter's relationship quickly collapsed as a result of his desire to rely on Nancy and his subsequent accusation of being the cause of it. After they split up, he had a protracted unemployed period and had to work many part-time jobs to make ends meet. I am ready to pursue the court order if he ever defaults on the child support or restitution. Stephen and I, meanwhile, are thriving in our new surroundings. He is maturing rapidly, flourishing in a loving household free from the pain of the past. My main goal is to keep giving him a loving environment and protect him from any more emotional upheaval.
Mom is going to live with us, too. Facing me, who had just purchased the top floor of a 50-story luxury apartment building. My husband said this with a grin, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "If you don't like it, get out." Together with Chris, my mother-in-law laughed derisively at me. This pair had always been like this. They had always treated me terribly. And they acted as if it were perfectly normal, showing no signs of remorse. I looked down to block their gazes, to hide my sneering mouth and the ugly distortion of my smile from them. My husband, who had neglected me and our children and had never cared for our home. And my mother-in-law, who had egged him on. I was determined not to be manipulated by them anymore. With that resolve, I forced a vague smile onto my face and looked them in the eyes. "That is, I cannot." That's what I muttered in my heart as I looked down again. Facing me, who said nothing back, my husband and mother-in-law hurled abuse. Let them keep underestimating me. In the background, I had been warming up a plan for a long time. To confront my deluded husband with the truth. And on the day of the move, a flood of calls came from my mother-in-law. "Oh, caught on?" By now, Chris and my mother-in-law must be panicking. And upon discovering the harsh reality, they will scream. My name is Gina Ford, a 47-year-old working housewife. I currently live with my son Tom and my daughter Sarah. My husband, Chris, has been on a business assignment for years. And we haven't even been in contact for many years. Our relationship can hardly be called familial, it's that distorted. However, it wasn't always like this between Chris and me. We met at a company drinking party when I was 23, and he married. Chris, 3 years my senior, was a lively and engaging person. At my first drinking party, I was nervously stiff in a corner when he cheerfully approached and brought me into the group. This sparked my admiration for him. He took care of me, and we soon started dating. Chris was always bright and fun, and I was increasingly drawn to him. However, Chris was a bit of a smooth talker and often nodded along without really listening to me. This slightly clueless aspect of him was overflowing with humanity. And at that time, it was attractive to me. As my feelings for him grew, I seriously wanted to marry Chris. He must have noticed my feelings because one day he earnestly proposed to me. Overwhelmed with emotion, I nodded through tears and dreamed of a happy married life with him. However, when I went to greet him for the marriage, there was a slight hitch. His father was a sensible man, but his mother seemed unable to let go of her son. "Gina, you are still only 23, right? Can she really support Chris properly at such a young age? You can't even manage household or work properly, can you? I doubt you can handle child rearing either." Being bluntly criticized like this made me shrink back. Then, his father, with a calm voice, reprimanded his wife. "What are you saying? You were the same age as Gina when you married me. And you gave birth to Chris when you were 25, didn't you?" His father's words silenced my mother-in-law, albeit grudgingly. Seizing the moment, Chris cheerfully said to them both, "It's okay, Mom. Gina might be young, but she's serious and hardworking. So she'll surely make a good wife. Right, Gina? You'll get along with Mom, won't you?" I nodded honestly to Chris's words. "Well, if Chris says so." With a sigh, my mother-in-law seemed somewhat resigned. With Chris's words and his father's mediation, I felt reassured and decided to marry him. At that time, I was truly young. When I reported the marriage to my own family, my parents were very happy. But my older sister frowned. My sister, 2 years older, was a good confidant who always listened to my stories. And she must have felt something off about my in-laws' situation. "Are you sure this is okay? Shouldn't you date him a bit longer?" I shook my head at my cautious sister's words. "It's okay. After all, Chris trusts me." I was eager to marry the person I loved and took my sister's concerns lightly. In retrospect, I regret not taking my sister's words more seriously. Knowing my determination, my sister sighed lightly and looked me straight in the eye. "All right. If you say so, I'll support you with all my might." Then she took my hand and continued. "But if anything happens, make sure you consult me. I'm always on your side." Thus, surrounded by blessings, Chris and I got married. However, even after our marriage, my mother-in-law's snide remarks and nagging didn't stop. And despite being newlyweds, Chris took me to his parents' house every weekend. "I'm an only child, and I want you to get along with Mom quickly." Unaware of my uneasy expression, Chris forcefully took me to his parents' house. Initially, in front of his father, his mother freely criticized me. But as his father continued to reprimand her, her attitude softened. Relieved for a moment, my mother-in-law then began to make snide remarks in secret. When her father and Chris were not listening, she blamed me. Unable to consult anyone, only the years passed by. However, the situation slightly improved later. 2 years later, my son Tom was born, and 2 years after that, my daughter Sarah was born. Using the busy days as a reason, I pleaded with Chris to reduce the frequency of visits to his parents' house. Even without this, Chris rarely helped with household chores or childcare. Even if my in-laws are close, given the current situation, it's impossible to visit every week. But Mom insists on seeing Tom. "You should show some filial piety occasionally too." I almost blurted out, "Then why don't you provide some family time?" But I swallowed my words in desperation. despite my daily hustle with childcare and housework. All that came out of Chris's mouth was about his mother. He kept saying she was lonely or concerned about Tom. I couldn't help but wonder, which family does he really care about? After getting married, I realized that Chris was excessively attentive to his mother. Probably because she doted on him excessively. And such doting by his mother was another headache for me. Yes, another reason I didn't want to go to my in-laws was not just my mother-in-law's snide remarks. While she doted unconditionally on her grandson Tom, she showed no interest in her granddaughter Sarah, treating her dismissively. However, she didn't express this by being sarcastic as she was with me. Instead, she maintained complete indifference. She would buy toys and sweets for Tom, but nothing for Sarah. She only spoke to Tom. And she always repeated the same thing to Tom. Tom, you are the heir of the Ford family. So you must listen well to what Grandma says. Each time, the young Tom would tilt his head and look up at me with a puzzled face. Mother, I'm sorry, but that's a bit. As I hesitated to speak, my father-in-law next to me quickly picked up Tom and peered into his son's face, saying, Tom, you don't have to listen to Grandma. Instead, you should grow up to be a kind man. As my father-in-law spoke gently, Tom giggled happily. Thus, each time my mother-in-law tried to indoctrinate Tom, my father-in-law gently steered him away from her. Since Sarah was born, my father-in-law started speaking differently to Tom. Tom, do you like Sarah? Yes, I love Sarah. Then, promise Grandpa that you'll protect your sister. Yes, I can promise. Perhaps my father-in-law sensed something. He made a pinky promise with Tom. This happened when Tom was 6 and Sarah was 4 years old. The difference in my mother-in-law's attitude towards Tom and Sarah was blatantly obvious to anyone, even to the young children. That's why my son and daughter, who had become aware of things, were attached to the kind and gentle father-in-law, but not to the grandmother who showed interest only in her grandson. Tom always looked sad and asked me, why doesn't Grandma treat Sarah the same way she treats me? Seeing my son hug his sister tightly made my heart clench. That's when I started visiting my in-laws even less frequently. I was already disliked by my mother-in-law, so I didn't want to get close to her place. Moreover, my mother-in-law's excessive behavior towards my children. All of these reasons led me to refuse to visit my in-laws, using childcare and household chores as excuses. My primary concern was to protect my children's hearts. At first, Chris grumbled about us not accompanying him. But perhaps dealing with my steadfast refusal became too troublesome for him. Eventually, Chris started visiting his parents alone on weekends. Thus, naturally, a distance grew between us. And a year later, when our daughter turned 5, my father-in-law passed away due to illness. And Chris's life became even more centered around his mother-in-law. With the loss of my father-in-law as a buffer, Chris stopped asking me to visit my in-laws. Perhaps my mother-in-law said something to him. Chris started visiting his in-laws after work, and prioritized his mother over his family even on holidays. He had always put our family second, and this worsened. Eventually, Chris spent most of the week at his parents' house. While I struggled with the gap growing between us, I was also overwhelmed with daily childcare and household chores, and I let the issue slide. And a year after my father-in-law's death, Chris's returns home became as infrequent as a few times a month. As a result, he almost had no interaction or conversation with the children. Desperate, I pleaded with Chris to fulfill his responsibilities as a father. Hey, the kids have a sports day coming up. You alone are enough for that. Chris dismissed it outright. Besides, on that day, Mom has asked me to do something for her. Again, it was his mother's errand. I inadvertently confronted Chris with a stern tone. But the children's events are once in a lifetime. You're their father after all. No, Mom is getting old, so it's only natural to prioritize her. What about our family, our daughter, and our son's feelings? How many times must the children have asked when their father would return or come to see us? Each time, I soothed the children. Then, with tears welling up in their eyes and lips pursed, they looked so brave. How many times that sight pained my heart. Chris always said, "You and the kids lack consideration for Grandma," angrily blaming us and storming out to stay with his mother for weeks. This continued for years, and I finally began considering divorce. But with only my part-time job income, I was unsure about supporting 2 children. That's when I remembered what my sister had said. My sister, who had not looked favorably upon our marriage. Her concerns had become a reality. I decided to call and consult her. After hearing my story, my sister chuckled slightly. Just as I thought, it turned out the way I feared. Actually, at that time, my sister was also married and in a similar situation. Hearing my story, she felt very uneasy. "I should have talked to you more thoroughly and stopped you." Sighing with self-deprecation, my sister shared an idea with me. Additionally, she offered financial and childcare support. It turned out she had divorced a few years ago and was providing me with various useful insights based on her experience. Currently, she was living alone near our parents' home and working. Following her advice, I began to gradually prepare for a divorce. At the same time, my husband, who had hardly been coming home, told me over the phone that he had suddenly been transferred. "I don't know when I'll be able to return, and Mom is going with me," he said briefly and hung up. I was surprised, but this situation was actually a blessing in disguise for me. While he was away, I acted steadily towards my goals with the help of my sister. The idea my sister had shared was challenging, but it made each day fulfilling. Seeing this, my children stopped mentioning their father. Instead, they started to support me. Their encouragement gave me strength. 3 years later, I finally achieved my goal. By that time, the financial support from my husband had ceased. But I had successfully become a full-time employee in a certain industry and was supporting the family financially. Little by little, the preparations for divorce were coming together. During this time, the children grew up healthily. The years flew by with their entrance and graduation from elementary and middle school, and then high school and college entrance exams. Of course, I had contacted my husband multiple times, but he never returned from work to attend any of the children's school events. 14 years had passed since his transfer. By then, my son was working, and my daughter had reached adulthood. Suddenly, Chris returned home with his mother. It was such an unexpected return that my children and I were shocked and looked at each other. Ignoring our confusion, Chris acted as if he still ruled the house. Just like when we had lived together. Our irritation grew with his arrogant attitude. Both my children and I were indifferent to Chris, who had never shown any familial duty, responsibility, or, most importantly, affection. "Hey, what's with that attitude towards the head of the family, you guys? Who do you think allowed you to live comfortably?" My son responded with a sardonic expression. "Who? It was all thanks to Mom." "What? There's no way a mere part-time housewife could support a family financially. Stop talking nonsense." Watching him rant, I suddenly questioned. "Hey, why did you come back now?" Chris answered arrogantly. "Mom recently hurt her leg and became bedridden. She needs care." Nodding, my mother-in-law also agreed. Chris then told us about a more dreadful plan. We'll all live here together, and you and Sarah will take care of Mom. Facing his words as if it were a natural family obligation, we looked at each other. You've never acted like a father before, and now you're playing the family card? Exactly, we have our own lives. Besides, we're moving out to a new place. What? What are you talking about? You just need to listen to me. Faced with his selfish words, my children and I decided to mercilessly execute the plan we had prepared. Actually, you know the luxury apartment near the station? What? The 50-story one? Thinking he was caught, I continued without confirming or correcting. We decided to move there. I tried contacting you, but you never responded. What? Then, Mom and I will live with you in that house. As he said something absurd, his mother nodded vigorously next to him. You must be joking. Absolutely not. My children and I desperately refused to live together. But Chris and his mother wouldn't listen and were fully intent on moving into the tower mansion. Mom is going to live with us, too. Facing me, who had just purchased the top floor of a 50-story luxury apartment building. Chris said this with a grin, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. If you don't like it, get out. Together with Chris, my mother-in-law laughed derisively at me. This pair had always been like this. They had always treated me terribly. And they acted as if it were perfectly normal, showing no signs of remorse. I looked down to block their gazes, to hide my sneering mouth and the ugly distortion of my smile from them. My husband, who had neglected me and our children and had never cared for our home. And my mother-in-law, who had egged him on. I was determined not to be manipulated by them anymore. With that resolve, I forced a vague smile onto my face and looked them in the eyes. That is, I cannot. That's what I muttered in my heart as I looked down again. Facing me, who said nothing back, my husband and mother-in-law hurled abuse. Let them keep underestimating me. In the background, I had been warming up a plan for a long time. To confront my deluded husband with the truth. And upon discovering the harsh reality, they will scream. On the day Chris and his mother moved in, I had actually moved to a different single-family home with my children. Yes, moving to the luxury apartment was just a ruse. By now, Chris and my mother-in-law must be panicking. As evidence, my smartphone was flooded with calls from them. I answered the call from my mother-in-law in a deliberately relaxed tone. What's the meaning of this?
Yeah.
Why aren't you guys here? Oh, caught on? Then I confront my husband and mother-in-law with the harsh reality. The kids and I have already moved safely. Hearing this, my husband and mother-in-law scream. What do you mean? Explain this. They complain to me upon learning this. However, I rebuff them, pointing out that they were the ones who arbitrarily decided to live together. Moreover, I use the long period of separation as grounds to push for a divorce from my husband. I had decided on a divorce and consulted my sister, who introduced me to a lawyer specialized in divorce, and I had been consulting with him. I was fully prepared. My husband resisted. But when I informed him that the divorce could be granted based on our long separation, he finally agreed to the divorce. At the end, he spitefully said that he didn't care if a part-time housewife who bought a house without savings struggled. In my heart, I muttered that it was okay, because I was already working as a full-time employee. And then I hung up the phone. Yes, my husband, who had neglected our family for 14 years, didn't know that I had gone to nursing school and become a nurse. When I discussed divorce with my sister, she suggested that I could attend nursing school using a nursing scholarship, which doesn't require repayment if I work at the sponsoring hospital afterward. In fact, my sister had also become a nurse using this scholarship and was working. At that time, she told me that our hospital was hiring and suggested I apply for an interview. Gratefully, I took her advice, and that has brought me to where I am today. Also, my husband didn't know that our son had landed a job at a top-tier company. Our ability to move into a single-family home was thanks to my stable job and my son's high income, which significantly eased our financial situation. And the luxury apartment I bought for my husband and mother-in-law to live in wasn't a new building. It was a 60-year-old building past its warranty period, rumored to collapse immediately if there was an earthquake. That's why I was able to buy it for a song. My husband must be shocked by now, thinking he was going to live in a new luxury apartment near the station. But that was just a misunderstanding he had from listening to me. 3 months after divorcing my husband, he and my mother-in-law were brought into the hospital where I work. Afterward, they gave up living in the apartment due to suspicions of it being a defective building, and seemed to be living in a rundown apartment. My mother-in-law, who was frail and had poor health, worsened her condition by catching a cold due to living in a drafty apartment without proper preparation. My husband also caught the cold from her and was running a high fever. I was dumbfounded by their lack of planning but continued my work indifferently. Eventually, a woman who appeared to be my ex-husband's new girlfriend visited them. Apparently, he had started dating her after our divorce. The girlfriend, who had come to visit, seemed to have been fed lies by my husband, as she verbally attacked me while I was taking his temperature. I've heard from Chris. You treated your mother-in-law terribly, didn't you? And you lied all along. While I continued my work, I firmly told her the truth. I don't know what you heard from my ex-husband, but this man prioritized his mother over everything else for 14 years, and never contributed to our living expenses during that time. What? The woman was visibly shocked. My husband protested, claiming it couldn't be true. I pulled out a bankbook I always carried from a file and thrust it at my husband. He checked its contents and uttered in dismay, "It's true, but why?" Stunned, my husband seemed to realize something and went to his mother's private room. He then asked her loudly, "Mom, I always left the money management to you, right? What's this all about?" While surprised by her son's fierce demeanor, my mother-in-law turned red and trembled. I had once heard about my mother-in-law's lavish spending from my father-in-law when he was alive. That's why my father-in-law had always managed the money in their household. Likely, my mother-in-law had embezzled the money meant for us. Misunderstanding that she could spend freely, she must have squandered it. As I explained this calmly to the woman, she looked horrified and broke up with my ex-husband on the spot, then left the hospital room with loud footsteps. Watching her leave, my enraged husband cursed at his mother. "Everything is ruined because of you. What are you going to do about this? It's not my fault. What's wrong with using my child's money?" My mother-in-law threw a tantrum and cried out. Amid the chaos, I quietly stepped away from them. Later, during his hospital stay, my ex-husband persistently pleaded with me to start over. "There's no chance I will start over with you. Besides, I'm about to be transferred soon." Yes, I had been assigned to transfer to a hospital in the countryside. This place had too many bad memories. My children and I felt this way, so after discussing it among ourselves, we bought a house in the neighboring state to start a new life. 5 years later, my children received a call from their father that their grandmother had passed away. They hesitated to attend the funeral, but I encouraged them to say their last goodbyes. Later, they told me that their father had aged significantly when they saw him after a long time. And the funeral seemed shabby and older than his actual age, my daughter remarked quietly. Hey, you guys, please. Aren't we family? Help me out. Although begged by their father, my son and daughter fulfilled their familial duties and returned home. And relatives, knowing the circumstances of our divorce, had distanced themselves from my ex-husband. In the end, he was left all alone after losing his mother. I think about it. Parents inevitably go before their children. Isn't it a parent's duty to guide their children to be able to walk on their own? I vow to myself not to forget this, and to maintain a healthy distance with my children's families to avoid the same mistakes as my former mother-in-law and ex-husband. Since then, I have been thriving as a nurse, maintaining a good relationship with my married children,